I'm having a little issue with my video today, so I'm just going to keep it to audio, but there's something that I want to go ahead and bring up. So presentation signups are going to be available online today at 6 o'clock. So you'll be able to find that within Presentation Center. So if you go to the Presentation Center, you'll go ahead and you'll see something right here that says Presentation Schedule. And all you got to do is go ahead and click on that, and that'll open up the Google Doc. And then you'll be able to go ahead and enter your name. There's a number of time slots. I've actually reduced the number of days just because there was just way too many. It was eating up a lot of time that I could be using for something else with the class in terms of like workshops on final papers or outlines or things like that. So I wanted to be able to give you a little bit. And there's only, as of now, I think there's only about 45 people in the class. So, 27 spots per day for 4 days. That's 80 some odd, almost 90 some odd spots. That's like 93 slots. So you'll have plenty of opportunity to go ahead and to get that. So so you'll notice that the sign up sheet gives different 15-minute windows because that's the time limit for the actual presentations. And then there's a break in there. And then you'll notice and then we have just the rest of the day. So feel free to go ahead and sign up. And in these time slots, be sure to enter your last name first, then your first name, the topic that is being covered, and include your section number as well, because I'm going to be separating these lists out and making sure that and then once these lists are finalized come the 20th of April, we'll go ahead and I'll put these up online in the Presentation Center. That way just the full schedule is up. That way people can kind of have a reference of what's going on. And then so if Monday doesn't work for you, there's Tuesday, April 22nd, Thursday, April 29th, and also Monday, May 3rd as well. So you'll have availability throughout these days to go ahead and sign up. Now, the way that this will work is that we're going to go ahead and do these over Zoom. I understand that some people may have trepidation about being on camera. That's fine as long as you're it's fine if you're not on camera because your slides will be taking precedent. But I want you to be able to go ahead and at least be able to have audio and video working. The day that you are doing your paper, you're doing your presentation, you're going to notice that the presentation Dropbox will be opened up. Please go ahead and drop off your PowerPoint or Keynote slides into this Dropbox. Just go ahead and put a copy in there. That way, if there's any technical difficulties, I can go ahead and actually broadcast your slides. That way you don't have to do it yourself. Just in case anything happens, or if there's any kind of technical issue, I can go ahead and do that for you. But it would be preferable that all of you do submit your slides before you are presenting. That way, if anything happens, we don't run into a schedule problem of having to, spending time figuring out technical issues. I'll have everything all set up and ready to go. And the people who are scheduled for that block already have their presentations up on my computer, being able to do that. To answer your question, Nikita, yes, you are going to be doing the paper before you're going to be doing the presentation before you do the paper. As I've mentioned before, you'll notice that the presentation also acts as kind of an oral rough draft of the paper. That way you can go ahead and it gives me an opportunity to look at everybody's work and see what they're doing, what people are doing well, what people need help on or work on, if there's anything that people need to find for their papers, if there's anything structurally that you might want to do or add. So that gives me a good opportunity that everybody gets individual one-on-one time discussing their work. So that's something that I really encourage. So this, which is why I'm having, ideally, you've been doing this work already as you're going through your annotated bibliography and your outline, because your outline is essentially setting you up for your slides, your pieces of evidence, all of that. You're really just kind of moving that over into a slide format. That way you can go ahead and give a presentation on it. And so that's why I'm considering it like an oral rough draft. So that's the kind of move for that, because then by that time, you'll have still like 2 weeks to do any kind of adjustments or all of that, because I started looking at the schedule and I had like presentations go through. If we look at the class calendar, I had presentations going through the 29th all the way until the 6th, and then final paper rough drafts, or I had them all the way until the 10th, which is overkill for a class of 42 people or 45 people. So I think we can make better time than just like make dead air for these days of like 2 people go. As opposed to giving that more time for working through your final paper. This gives me more opportunity to do lectures and questions and Q&A and workshops all throughout the paper. So by the time that you have your rough draft due for your final, I can go ahead and actually, take this whole finals week and be able to, like, my goal is to have any rough drafts that are submitted to be turned back in by Monday or Tuesday. Like, that's my goal, is I want to be able to get your stuff in by Friday. Now, if you give me your final paper earlier than that, the earlier you send it, the earlier I give it. This is just the deadline. Like Friday, the 14th of May is just the absolute last day that I can take a rough draft paper. Anything after the 14th, I'm just considering it that you're turning in your final. So that's my cutoff for when someone wants to turn in their rough draft. The rest of these, so after the 3rd, will be workshops. So the 4th, the 6th, the 11th, and the 13th will all be workshops for the rough draft and what to do, how to work them. We'll go through specific things about like, how do we deal with, making sure we can organize arguments correctly, or how can we put things together that may be a little bit more intricate or may feel sometimes convoluted. So those are the things that I want to be able to share with you all. With that, the final paper will actually be due. I make it the absolutely latest possible day of finals week, and that would be Friday the 21st. Because that would be the last week of finals. That would be the day of finals. And then I believe graduation is sometime around here on the 23rd or 24th. And then grades are due that following Tuesday on the 25th of May. So I always provide the last possible day for people to go ahead and turn their papers in. If you'd like to turn them in early, I will make sure that there is a deliberately separate final draft inbox. That way, the sooner you get it in, the sooner you want to be done with my class and be finished with me and be rid of me for the rest of your time here. I don't blame you. So that will be how that works. With that being said, I noticed that there's more people than usual here, so I'd like to just kind of open up the room for questions, because I'm sure that whatever questions you have, other people that are watching this on YouTube, I'm sure probably have similar questions. Anything about the presentation, anything about the actual presentation lecture that you may have wanted to get some clarification on, anything about your papers, anything about the outline, the annotated bibliography, everything's open right now. So whatever you want to ask, go for it.
Hello.
Uh-huh.
Hi. So when we do our presentation, you said that they need to be around 10 minutes long?
Roughly about 10 minutes long. That's why I have a block of 15, just, loading things up, getting things ready. If there's any kind of Q&A, I usually try to have a minute or two of question and answer. Just if anybody, just if I'd like to ask a couple of questions of you, give you some commentary and critique. I just don't want to be like, oh, here's the presentation next. I want to be able to actually give you some, take some time and give you some feedback.
Okay, so we can go like a little like just ballpark it around 10 minutes.
Yeah, ballpark around 10 minutes would be great. That's why I say 7 to 10. Nobody ever hits 7. Everybody ends up speaking longer than they were expecting.
Okay, that was just my question.
Cool. It's not a requirement, but if you can, preferably uh, dress up a little bit. I'd like for this to be practice for. I will be in a suit and tie when we are doing presentations. I just want you to have the experience of giving a professional presentation in professional clothes in the 21st century version of a meeting, I would imagine. Um, during COVID, at least. I have a feeling that this is going to stick around post COVID, this whole online stuff. So don't be surprised if you go into if you get an office job or an administrative job and you're doing a lot more of these. So I just want to give you the opportunity. I'm not going to require it. It's not part of the grade. But if you just, I want you to have the opportunity to just have kind of a practice round of being able to give a presentation. One of the things that I do want to mention, and you'll notice this already, is if you go to the grading sheet of the presentation, I actually give you exactly what I'm grading you on. And there's one thing in here that you'll notice is not there. Anybody see it? Anybody notice the absence of it? You're giving a presentation. What am I not grading you on?
Declared position.
Oh, it's there. Nope, that's all there. This is all my grading stuff.
Speech?
PowerPoint?
Speech.
Oh,
I'm not grading you on how well you speak. I'm not grading you on if you're a great orator. You could stutter through the whole thing and get 100%. So I don't want anybody to be intimidated by someone giving a very eloquent, articulate speech because they're on the debate team or something like that, and they happen to be just really good at public speaking, and then you don't do a lot of public speaking and you're at a disadvantage. I don't want that to hinder your grade. So I've structurally cut myself off at the knees, so I cannot grade you on your speaking quality or your speaking ability. I do not do that. The things that I ask for are the things that are requirements of the presentation. Do you give us a roadmap? Do you explain where you're going? Do you give us a declared position that's cogent and clear and concise? Do you give us definitions? Do you provide citations for those definitions? Do you give us historical context? Do you cite the sources of that historical context? Are you able to put it together in a way that makes sense? Do you give detailed argumentation? Or are you able to articulate the differing opinions of the different of the different points of view of the reason of why people are arguing, like whether or not DACA should be reinstated or whether or not there should be an assault weapons ban or yada yada yada. The other thing that I also would mention is supporting evidence is a big one. Like, of all the stuff you're saying, make sure that you're backing it up, that everything that you're speaking about should be coming from the text that you've researched. The only time that you're really going to be getting into kind of the way you see it is when you get into the evaluation and critique section of the presentation and of the paper. Everything else should be cited and researched as you're going along. Because you're setting up your case of why, for instance, in your presentation, why DACA should be renewed. And in your paper, you'll be giving the reasons why there are those who argue that DACA should be renewed, because the distinction between the presentation and the paper is that in the presentation, you're in the arena, you're advocating for a position. The reason I do this is because it would just be kind of, frustrating. You spend all this time researching all of this stuff and spending a whole semester looking at this stuff, and then I don't give you an opportunity to tell me what you think should happen. I just think that would just be creatively frustrating. So I provide the presentation as an outlet for that. The final, you are a reporter. You are taking a step back and analyzing it objectively and fairly. And so those are the things that I want you to be able to do. Those are the distinctions between the presentation and the final. Big no, do not turn your presentation into the final paper in terms of do not make your final paper an advocacy paper. You are analyzing why there are those for or against gun control measures, for or against um, uh, abortion policies, or some people think that cryptocurrency should be a regulated currency, and some people think that it should not be recognized as a legitimate currency. Why or why not? What are the reasons that people argue that there should and shouldn't be? Or like Freddie is talking about police reform. Well, the kind of general overall consensus is that police reform is needed, but the big debate is, well, what does that look like? Well, some people think it looks like this, and here are the reasons why. And there are some people who think that it looks like this, and here are those reasons why. And here's how they differ. Here's how they clash. That's going to be the large part of your final. That's what the final is going to be primarily focused on, is you being able to analyze different points of view and being able to look at the clash. And this is kind of the thing that we're going to be really talking about for the next couple of lectures and the next couple of presentations that I'm going to bring, that I'm going to be posting up, because now we're really getting into it. And we'll also talk about different styles of argumentation presentation. We'll also be doing some interesting stuff about, like, how do we think about arguments? How do we think about analysis? So we're going to be really getting into the nitty gritty on that. Freddie, you had a question.
Yeah, for our actual like PowerPoint or keynote, is it due on the day we sign up, or is it going to be like a set due date for everyone to turn it in?
No, your presentation will be due the day that you do it. The presentation in and of itself, I'm not going to collect it and grade it. The presentation is the actual oral presentation. The only reason I'm asking for a file is just for the sake of the schedule. So, you have your presentation, then all of a sudden, it doesn't work. Well, I have a copy. And so we can get going. That way we're not, running 10, 20 minutes behind schedule.
Cool. And my other question was like for the contents of the presentation, we could use like the sources we've been using since the beginning, right?
God, I hope so.
Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah, that's going to be everything that you're working on at this point. I want you to use everything that you've been looking at. That's why I have you decide a topic at the beginning of the semester, because then you're able to basically collate all of that data and use it in something that's that ends up becoming kind of this larger work. Everybody thinks my syllabus sounds really crazy and crunched when they look at it, but then when you start actually doing it, it makes sense that, oh, I've been working on my final since week 3.
Right. Yeah, because I was noticing like, with the historical context or even like the definitions, I already have those. So it's like not copy and pasting, because that would be bad, but it kind of is. Like you're just reusing the same definitions and the history.
Well, the thing is that you're doing the research for it. Like, so the way that you want to think about this class is that it's not that it's each individual thing and like, oh, we have a hot newspaper. Oh, we have the way I want you to think about this class is that we're writing one paper. And what we're doing is we're slowly going through all the steps that it takes to write a large analytical grad school level paper. So you have to be able to be familiar with newspaper analysis and content analysis in newspapers. You have to be familiar with being able to research databases. You have to be familiar with being able to search for news articles, to be able to look for peer-reviewed journals, how to go ahead and read them. So all of the questionnaires that I give you for these prompts for the hot news and the journal article analysis are there, because that's the way that you should be thinking anytime that you go ahead and pull up a source. Those are the questions that you should always be asking yourself as you're analyzing the source, because those will be the helpful ways for you to be able to see what is useful and what is not. The other thing that I also mentioned is that's the reason why we go through things like, commas, for instance, because there's an expectation that you kind of already know how to write. And I noticed that a lot of people don't have kind of a refresher after a couple of years. I'm sure that a lot of you haven't gone over stuff like this since like, probably sophomore year in high school. So I want to be able to kind of give you a refresher. And then The other thing that I go over is argumentation. Like, so how do we look at good or bad arguments? How do we recognize like rhetorical fallacies? And so like, how do we recognize like in an editorial that, may be kind of overblowing an issue? That way you don't kind of make a mountain out of a molehill. And the reason that we go through so many sources is because the more diversity of sources you have, the more sources that you're able to use in a paper, the more that you kind of defend yourself from the biases of a single individual source. And so that's the kind of really big issue that people tend to have, particularly in undergrad, is people tend to just get one source and go, okay, I'm good. But the problem is that when you pull that source, you own it. You own any of the biases, you own any of the agendas, you own any of the research that source used. So by having a diversity of sources, even if it's about the same thing, you're able to get a kind of a more holistic picture, and you have a better idea of what's going on. One of the things that people always ask me is like, how do you know how much research you have? Well, if you think of research as kind of like a circle, right? Well, I do research that's just a slightly bigger than that circle. So if you think of concentric circles, it's like all your data is, one little 1-inch circle. Well, all the research you do would be 1.5 inches in diameter instead. So I always try and research just slightly out of the realm of what I'm actually talking about, so I get a better idea of what it is that I'm reading or what it is that I'm researching. That way I know that I'm not going down a rabbit hole, or if I'm not kind of missing the point. Very often when I'm doing research for something, I'll go ahead and I have like a whole binder full of sources. Like I'll get a 1-inch binder and I'll print out all my sources, and I'll read them like it's a book, and go through all of that. But that's also because I'm just incredibly neurotic as well. But it's one of those things where it's a good idea to, before you start writing a single word, it's really helpful to just know what you're talking about. Because if you have a familiarity with the subject matter already by doing research and looking at things, research begets research. The more you learn about something, the more you are familiar with the terminology, the more you're familiar with the history, the more you're familiar with what other things to search for. And so, the more research that you do and the more research that you engross yourself with, the more comfortable you are with actually talking about the subject matter. And, vis-a-vis, it makes it a lot easier to write a paper about stuff about. You have much more confidence in writing what you're talking about. It also helps a lot of writers block of like, I don't know where to start. Well, the question is, do you have too much information and you just don't know where to go and organize it? Or is it because you have writer's block because you don't have enough information, you're pulling blood from stone? And so and I'm noticing it's usually the latter that's the problem in undergrad, is that there's just not enough information and not enough understanding of the subject matter that they're trying to research. And that's usually what becomes the kind of the sticky wicket and the roadblock for somebody to be able to kind of successfully complete their final. And so, which is why I put all of these like things that you need to do in the way before you even have that kind of like big 2.5 week gap of writing the final. Because I want you to be able to kind of get all of that done, even just a first run at it of analyzing, researching, sourcing, organizing by doing the outline. So, I want you to have kind of a first one shot at that before we get into it. So those are going to be the big things that we have. So, the first presentation date, I believe, is the 26th. Yeah. So that would be in about 11 days, in about a week and a half. And so at this point, I'm expecting that you guys have kind of already know what you guys are doing, because the research that you've been doing for the journal articles, the hot newspaper, that's why I was having you do, pick 3 of these and do 1, because I wanted you already to kind of have a familiarity of what was going on. And so we're really kind of picking up the pace here. I definitely have given some deference because I know that this has been kind of a chaotic quarter, but now this is one of the times where I'm wanting to kind of put I want to make sure that I'm giving my class the priority in what's going on, because we've been building all of this up. Now, granted, as long as you've been doing that, you should be fine. And this is why we're going to have these open workshops, which is really kind of open forums for answering questions, because the lectures, I'm not going to eat up time in here to give lectures. Those will be recordings that you should be watching, because I don't want to eat up time, doing a lecture for an hour and then have 15 minutes left and then it's office hours. I'd rather you already have seen it or have it available for you. And then this is a, protected time for you to be able to ask questions and clarifying things, trying to do the best I can, since we're not in a classroom and you don't have just easy access and availability to me. So that's kind of the idea of what's going on. And that's, what my mindset is about where we're going forward with the rest of the class. I mean, you're almost there. You're at the home stretch. I did notice that I don't have any extra credit posted for this class, and I usually do. So probably by tonight or tomorrow, expect that there will be 1 or 2 extra credit assignments, just to kind of throw them out there. One I usually have is a pretty fun one, is to watch Childish Gambino's This Is America and give me just kind of a response to it. I think it's still as relevant now as it was when it came out a couple years ago. So I have stuff like that. There's also one that I usually show, which is usually what's done around this time, but I show it in class or when we were doing synchronous classes. There's a documentary that I show called Paris is Burning, and that I provide quite a good chunk of extra credit for that assignment, for watching that documentary and then giving a response to it, an informal response. And I have some questions that are posted with it as well. And so that'll be posted along as well. So if that's something, if you have a free day to, just kind of watch a movie for an hour and a half, and then, just it's a free write of, 2 pages, 2-3 pages. Trust me, if the movie is good enough, that the documentary is good enough, that you'll write and write. So those will be posted up probably just later on tonight. For the record, the presentation schedule goes live at 6 o'clock. It's already loaded into Blackboard. It's just on a timer, and it will unlock in 90 minutes. So if you have an opportunity to, if you already have an idea of where you want to go ahead and sign up, it will unlock at 6 o'clock tonight, Thursday, April 15th, for those of you on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it's already unlocked. So go to the presentation center. With that, do I have any other questions that may have been brought up as I was talking? Okay. The other thing that I was also mentioned is I'm working on your journal article analyses right now. That's the other thing that I'm trying to finish up. I'd like to be done with them by the weekend, like in their entirety. Some of you have already gotten them back. So the minute that I grade them, I send them to your hot news, to your shared folder. So here's a good way of knowing if your paper got graded. If your paper is not in the Dropbox, it's in your shared folder. So just keep an eye out on that. And if you see that if there's any edits to it, that means I'm working on it at that moment. So just something to keep in mind. Other than that, just last call for any other questions before I go ahead and close out today. Things that kind of working order, things that I would just encourage you to do, just make sure that your annotated bibliography is turned in by tomorrow night at midnight. By midnight, I would also encourage you to not try and submit it at 11:59, because quite a few people tried to do that for the journal article analysis and they got flagged as late. The computer will automatically flag it for me if it is past 12 midnight. So just be sure to keep that in mind. It's 11:59, not midnight or 12:01. It will be considered late. So just make sure that you get it in on time. And I'm not even asking you to do it like, 6 hours before. I'm just, if you're turning it in, at least give yourself, 10, 15 minutes to turn it in, just in case there's anything that goes wrong. Other than that, keep an eye out for your grades. Those are going to be posted up. I am periodically updating them. That way everything's up to date. And other than that, that's all I have for you. Last call, any other questions? Okay. Well, if you do have any other questions that you'd like to ask me privately, I will be hosting office hours at 5 o'clock. So if you have any other issues that you need to go ahead and reach me by, go ahead and just jump back onto this room at 5 o'clock and I'll be able to answer your questions. But be mindful that there's a waiting room in the office hours. I noticed that some people will jump in and then leave because I didn't answer their invitation yet. I do try and have protected time for the people in the office hours. So if you're sitting in a waiting room, it's because I'm talking to someone else and they haven't left yet. So just let me know. So if you're sitting in the waiting room, stay there because I see you. It's a big alert that shows up on my Zoom, and I'll hit accept as soon as I'm done. So trust me, and it doesn't go away. Like it'll say such and such is waiting in the waiting room, and then I'll go ahead and I'll let people in the order that they showed up. So just keep that in mind, that if you're just sitting in the waiting room and I haven't answered, it's because I'm with another student. Unless it's like 5:58 and you're jumping on at 5:59 and I'm starting to shut everything down. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Be sure to finish your annotated bibliographies, and remember your outlines are due by Tuesday. So keep that in mind. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. And if you have any other questions that you want to go ahead and address on Zoom, we will see you on Tuesday. Take care, everybody. Have a good weekend.